They say silence in the countryside can soothe the soul, but sometimes silence is the sound of something unspeakable. In the spring of 1922, deep in the Bavarian farmland of Germany, a family vanished behind the doors of a lonely homestead. Their story would become one of the darkest, most confounding murder mysteries in European history, the Hinterkaifeck Murders. Tonight, we travel back a century to a farmhouse where the walls still whisper. Just outside the small town of Gruber stood a solitary farm known as Hinterkaifeck, an isolated patch of land surrounded by dense woods and rolling fields. The Gruber family lived there. Andreas Gruber, the strict 63-year-old patriarch, Kazilia, his wife, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, and Victoria's two young children, little Kazilia, age 7, and baby Joseph, barely 2. The family kept mostly to themselves. To the villagers, the Grubers were hardworking but strange. Andreas was known to be controlling. Some said cruel, and rumors whispered that Victoria's late husband had died in the war under mysterious circumstances. But no rumor prepared them for what was to come. On the morning of March 31st, 1922, Andreas noticed something odd in the snow leading to his farmhouse. Footprints. They came from the forest. A straight line of heavy boots, but none returned. He searched the barn, the stables, even the attic. No intruder, nothing stolen. But that night, the family began hearing footsteps in the attic, deliberate, slow, pacing above their heads. Andreas armed himself with his scythe and lantern, prowled through every corner. Again, nothing. The next day, the keys to the house disappeared. Then a newspaper appeared that no one in the family had bought. Something or someone was living inside their home. On April 1st, neighbors saw Victoria at church with her children. She looked pale and anxious. A friend later recalled she seemed haunted. A few days passed. Mail piled up. The children didn't show at school. The postman noticed the shutters were closed, but the chimney still smoked. Someone was there. On April 4th, a repairman arrived for a job Victoria had requested. He knocked, no answer. Only the faint sound of livestock inside. He assumed the family was busy and left. 2 days later, neighbors finally grew concerned. They formed a small search group and trudged toward Hinterkaifeck under the gray afternoon sky. When they entered the barn, they found the livestock restless but alive. The horses snorted, stamping nervously. Then someone noticed a pile of straw and hay, disturbed, oddly shaped. He reached down. Underneath, he touched cold skin. There, the body of Andreas Gruber, his face battered beyond recognition. Next to him, Kazilia Gruber, her skull crushed. Beside her, Victoria, her throat marked with signs of strangulation and blunt trauma. And a few feet away, the little girl Kazilia, her tiny hands clutched with tufts of her own hair, ripped out in terror. They had all been lured to the barn, one by one, and killed. When villagers entered the farmhouse, the horror deepened. Inside, in the bedroom, they found baby Joseph dead in his cot, and the family maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had only arrived the day before the murders. 6 victims in total. But here's what froze everyone's blood. The fireplace was warm. The animals had been fed. Meals had been eaten. Someone had lived in the house for days after the killings. Police from Munich arrived soon after. But the crime scene was chaos. Villagers had walked through everything before investigators came. Still, the clues were chilling. The murders likely happened on the evening of March 31st. The killer used a mattock, a sharp farming tool found on the property. There were signs the murderer had hidden in the barn's hayloft for several days before striking. And despite hundreds of interviews, no one saw anyone leave. The theory, the killer had waited, watched, then killed the family one by one, luring them into the barn under some pretext. perhaps the sound of animals or a disturbance, before turning on those left inside the house. Over the years, countless theories tried to explain Hinterkaifeck. Some villagers suspected Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor who had once been romantically involved with Victoria. Some even believed he was baby Joseph's father. He led the group that discovered the bodies, and many found his calmness disturbing. He reportedly opened the barn without hesitation, moved the corpses, and fed the animals. When questioned, he claimed he was simply helping, but whispers spread. Did he know more than he admitted? Others pointed to a vagrant or a former farmhand seeking revenge. One man, Carl Gabriel, Victoria's supposedly deceased husband, was rumored to have survived the war and returned. Could he have killed them after discovering Victoria's affair? Some locals believed the Gruber's own dark secrets led to their deaths. It was whispered that Andreas and Victoria shared an incestuous relationship, for which they had once been tried. If true, it might have fueled shame, blackmail, or revenge. But none of these theories ever proved anything. For weeks after the murders, strangers reported seeing smoke rise from the chimney. Others said they heard dogs barking, footsteps, or faint crying near the ruins. When the farm was finally demolished a year later, workers unearthed the family's skulls, taken by investigators to Munich for forensic study. But during World War II, those skulls vanished, lost forever. To this day, no one knows where they are or who killed the Grubers. Modern detectives, historians, and crime enthusiasts have re-examined the case for decades. DNA evidence was impossible, most materials destroyed by time and war. But one detail endures. Whoever committed the murders had intimate knowledge of the farm, the family, and their routines. The killer likely watched them for days, hidden in the attic, listening to every conversation, every prayer, every frightened breath, and then waited for night. When the time came, he lured each victim into the barn, silenced them, and returned inside to finish what he started. Years later, villagers avoided the area. They said the land itself felt cursed. Children claimed to see a woman standing near the ruins, staring into the forest. Travelers swore they heard whispering at night. Maybe imagination, maybe guilt. But for those who live near the old Hinterkaifeck site today, the air still feels heavy, as if the past refuses to rest. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved. A century later, the mystery endures. 6 souls vanished under a moonless sky, in a place no one should have died so violently. Was it jealousy, vengeance, or madness? No one can say. But somewhere in those frozen fields, beneath layers of time and silence, the truth still lingers, waiting for someone brave enough to listen.